You were alone, and suddenly you felt like someone was watching you. Your body froze for a second, no sound, no visible presence, but something changed in the air. Have you ever felt that? It's a strange moment because it doesn't come with a clear reason. Nothing moves, nothing appears, and yet you know something shifted. Your breathing changes before you think about it. Your attention sharpens. For a brief instant, you're fully here, aware of the space around you and of yourself inside it. Most people brush this off right away. They tell themselves it was imagination, nerves, coincidence. They return to whatever they were doing and never look back. But what if that feeling wasn't random? What if it showed up at that exact moment because something inside you had just changed? This kind of experience doesn't happen when you're distracted or rushing. It appears in quiet moments, often right after you see or realize something that touches you more deeply than expected. And when it happens, it leaves a question hanging in the air, not about what's around you, but about what just awakened within you. You're not imagining it, and you're not losing control of your mind. That sudden sensation, the one that makes your body pause for a fraction of a second, has a name even if most people never learn it. It's a moment of heightened awareness when your nervous system and your attention align at the same time. For a brief instant, you're not running on habit or distraction. You're fully present. And that state exists for a reason. Most of the time, you move through life half-focused. Your eyes see, but your attention is scattered. Your body is here, but your thoughts are elsewhere. Then something happens. You see something that hits you deeper than expected. A phrase, an image, a look, a memory triggered out of nowhere. And suddenly, your attention snaps into the present moment. That snap is not gentle. It's sharp. Your system notices the shift immediately. That's when the feeling appears. Your breathing changes before you even realize it. Muscles tighten slightly. Your skin becomes more sensitive. It's the same biological response humans evolved to have when something important enters the environment. Long before language, this reaction kept people alive. It said, "Pay attention now. Something meaningful is happening." But here's what most people don't understand. This reaction isn't only about danger, it's about significance. Your brain and body are constantly filtering reality, deciding what matters and what doesn't. When something breaks through that filter, your entire system reacts. You feel watched not because someone is standing there, but because your awareness has widened. You're no longer focused only inward. You're suddenly aware of the space around you, of subtle shifts, of presence itself. In psychology, this is connected to heightened perception. In neuroscience, it's linked to attention networks activating at once. In spiritual traditions, it's often described as a moment when consciousness turns outward and inward at the same time. Different languages, same experience. And it tends to happen at very specific moments for a reason. It often appears when you're already in a reflective or emotionally open state. When something you saw or thought about disrupted your usual mental noise, that disruption creates a gap. And in that gap, awareness expands. The feeling isn't random. It's a signal that your internal state has changed. People who experience this more often aren't special or chosen. They're simply more attentive to their internal shifts. They notice when their focus sharpens. Most people feel the same thing and immediately override it. They reach for their phone, they shake it off. They tell themselves it's nothing. But it is something. That someone is watching me sensation is your mind realizing it's no longer the only thing in the room. Not because of an external being, but because your perception has moved beyond its usual narrow tunnel. You've stepped out of autopilot, and autopilot hates interruptions. There's also a deeper layer most people miss. Attention is not passive. When you observe something deeply, your brain doesn't just receive information, it reorganizes itself around it. Your focus changes your internal state, and when your internal state changes, your experience of reality changes with it. That's why the feeling often comes right after you see or realize something important. Your system is recalibrating, old patterns loosen for a second, new sensitivity comes online, and that transition feels strange because it's unfamiliar. Some traditions call this moment a threshold, not a doorway to something mystical, but a shift between unconscious and conscious living. For a brief time, you're not lost in thought. You're not projecting stories onto the world, you're just here. And being fully here can feel intense if you're not used to it. Your mind tries to explain the intensity the fastest way it knows how. It reaches for the closest story. Someone is watching me. That story isn't literal. It's symbolic. It's your awareness noticing awareness. The purpose of the feeling isn't to scare you. It's to invite you to stay present a little longer, to notice what changed inside you right before it happened, to ask, without words, why this moment mattered enough to wake you up. Most people never follow that thread. They shut it down before it leads anywhere. But if you don't immediately dismiss it, you start to see a pattern. The feeling doesn't appear during meaningless moments. It arrives when something touches a deeper layer of you, when your attention aligns with something real. And once you understand that, something else becomes clear. This sensation isn't just internal. It doesn't exist in isolation. When your attention sharpens, your interaction with the world changes. The way you observe affects the field around you, socially, emotionally, energetically. Presence has weight. Focus has impact. That's where things start to move beyond just in your head. Not into fantasy or fear, but into the understanding that observation itself is an active force. And when you step into that force, even briefly, the world feels different. That difference is subtle, but it's enough to make you pause, enough to make you feel like something noticed the shift too. And that's where the next layer begins. When people say, it's all in your head, they usually mean nothing actually changed. But that's not accurate. Something did change, just not in the way most people are trained to notice. The moment that feeling appears, your inner state shifts, and that shift doesn't stay contained inside your skull. It ripples outward. You're not a closed system. Your body constantly exchanges signals with the environment. Your posture, your breathing, your muscle tone, your gaze, all of it broadcasts information. When your attention sharpens, those signals reorganize. You become more coherent, more aligned. And coherence is felt, even if it isn't seen. Think about walking into a room where two people just had an argument. No one says a word, yet you feel it immediately. The air feels heavier. The silence has texture. Nothing visible happened to you, but you still sensed it. That's because humans are extremely sensitive to subtle changes in their surroundings, especially when they're not distracted. The same thing happens when the shift comes from you. When you focus deeply on something, your nervous system moves out of scattered mode and into a more unified state. Your breathing slows or holds. Your body becomes still. Your attention gathers. From the outside, you might look calm. From the inside, something powerful is happening. Your signal becomes clearer. Clarity changes how you occupy space. People often misunderstand the word energy because they imagine something mystical or dramatic. But at its core, energy is simply movement and organization. A calm person has a different presence than an anxious one. A focused person feels different from someone lost in thought. You've felt this your entire life without naming it. So when your attention locks in after seeing something meaningful, your internal movement changes. And because you're not separate from your environment, the space around you responds. Not with flashing lights or strange sounds, but with a subtle sense of density, stillness, or intensity. That's why the feeling can seem external, even though it starts within you. Your brain is constantly predicting reality based on patterns. When those patterns shift suddenly, your perception updates in real time. The world feels different because you're meeting it from a different state. It's like tuning a radio. The station was always there, but now the signal is clearer. This is also why not everyone experiences this the same way. If your attention is usually scattered, moments of coherence feel unfamiliar, even threatening. The mind tries to label the unfamiliar quickly so it can regain control. Someone is watching me is a fast label. It gives shape to the unknown. But if you stay with the sensation instead of fighting it, you notice something important. There's no immediate danger. There's no intrusion. There's just heightened presence. Presence has a kind of gravity. Animals respond to it. Children notice it. Even adults feel it, though they may not admit it. When someone is truly present, the space around them feels different. Conversations slow down. Noise fades. Things feel more real. That's not imagination. That's biology and perception aligning. So when you suddenly feel watched, it's often because you're no longer hiding from the moment. You're fully here. And being fully here is intense if you're not used to it. There's another layer to this that's easy to miss. Attention doesn't just move outward. It also reflects. When you become deeply aware, you start noticing yourself noticing. Awareness becomes aware of itself. That feedback loop can feel strange, almost like being observed from the inside. Your mind isn't used to that. It's used to being the observer, not the observed. That internal reflection creates a sense of presence that feels larger than your usual identity. Not bigger in an ego sense, but wider, less confined. The boundaries between me and here soften slightly, and when boundaries soften, sensation increases. This is where language starts to struggle. People reach for words like field, atmosphere, presence, energy, not because they're being dramatic, but because ordinary vocabulary isn't built for subtle experience. What matters is not the label, but the function. Something shifted. Your attention became organized. Your perception widened. And the space around you felt it because you felt it. The mistake is assuming that because the experience isn't visible, it isn't real. Many of the most important human processes are invisible. Thoughts, emotions, intentions, focus. Yet they shape behavior, decisions, and relationships constantly. This moment is no different, and it usually doesn't come alone. It often follows something that caught your attention for a reason. Something that disturbed your inner balance just enough to wake you up. A message, an image, a realization. The feeling isn't separate from that trigger. It's a response to it. Your system recognized significance before your conscious mind did. That's why these moments feel charged. Not because something supernatural entered the room, but because you stepped into a deeper level of engagement with reality. You weren't just seeing anymore. You were responding. And once you understand that your observation changes the space you're in, another question naturally begins to form. Why did this happen right after you saw that specific thing? It almost never happens out of nowhere. If you look closely, that sensation arrives after something touches you first. You saw something, you read a sentence, you noticed a face, a symbol, a moment that landed deeper than expected, and only then did your body react. That sequence matters. Your mind likes to believe it decides what's important, but most of the time importance is registered before thought gets involved. Your nervous system notices relevance faster than language can keep up. By the time you understand something affected you, your body has already responded. That's why the feeling follows the moment of seeing. When something reaches you at the right depth, it disrupts your internal rhythm. Not in a dramatic way, but enough to interrupt the background noise you live in all day. For a second, you're no longer skimming reality. You're actually receiving it. That reception opens something. It doesn't mean the object itself was magical. It means it matched something already alive inside you. A question you haven't fully formed yet. A tension you've been carrying quietly. A curiosity you didn't know how to name. When the outside matches the inside, attention locks in. And attention is the key. Your brain is constantly filtering. Thousands of images, sounds, and signals pass through you every minute without leaving a trace. But when something aligns with an internal pattern, the filter drops. The moment gets through, and when it does, your entire system responds. That response doesn't stay mental. Your breathing shifts. Your posture adjusts. Your senses widen. You become alert without knowing why. This is the same mechanism that makes time slow down during meaningful moments. It's not mystical. It's focus intensified by relevance. But here's the part most people miss. When you truly see something, not just glance at it, you're not a passive observer. You're participating. Your attention reaches out, it engages, it connects. And connection always works both ways. Think about eye contact. You can feel when someone is really looking at you versus when their eyes are empty. The difference isn't physical, it's attentional. Something moves between 2 points of awareness. The same principle applies here, even when there's no person involved. When something captures you deeply, your awareness extends toward it. And in that extension, you leave your usual closed loop of thoughts. You're no longer just inside your head. You're meeting something. That meeting creates vulnerability. Not danger, but openness. Your usual defenses soften. Your mind isn't busy controlling the narrative. And when control drops, sensitivity rises. You start noticing more, inside and around you. That's when the feeling appears. It's not that the thing you saw caused the sensation directly. It acted like a key. It unlocked a state you don't visit often, a state where you're present enough to feel subtle shifts, and subtle shifts feel big when you're not used to them. There's also timing involved. These moments often happen when you're alone, quiet, or already reflective, not because solitude is mystical, but because there's less interference, fewer distractions to pull you back into autopilot. The signal has room to register. You might tell yourself, it was just a coincidence. But coincidence doesn't explain why your body reacted before your thoughts did, or why the feeling had texture, weight, and immediacy. Your system recognized meaning. Another important detail is that what affects you isn't always what you think you saw. Sometimes it's not the image, but what it represents. A reminder of something unresolved, a possibility you've been avoiding, a truth you weren't ready to face consciously. The mind often latches onto the surface content, but the body responds to the deeper layer. That's why you can't always explain why something hit you. You just know it did. And once that deeper layer is activated, your awareness doesn't immediately settle back down. It stays open, alert, slightly exposed. That openness can feel like being watched because you're no longer hiding behind distraction. You're present enough to notice presence itself. Most people have been trained to ignore these moments, to move on quickly, to scroll, talk, distract, or rationalize. Not because they're weak, but because no one taught them how to stay with subtle awareness without panicking. So the instinct is to shut it down. You laugh it off, you look away, you tell yourself it was nothing, and in doing so, you collapse the opening that just appeared. The system returns to normal. The opportunity passes unnoticed. But if you slow down instead, you start to see the pattern. The feeling isn't random. It's linked to moments of contact. Moments when something reached you and you reached back even briefly. That exchange is delicate. It doesn't force itself. It waits to see what you'll do with it. And this is where many people make the same mistake without realizing it. They treat the moment as an error instead of an invitation. The moment arrives quietly and most people rush to make it disappear, not because it's dangerous, but because it doesn't fit into the pace they're used to living in. The body pauses, awareness sharpens, and instead of staying with it, the mind immediately looks for an exit. It tells you to move on, to shake it off, to label it as nothing. That reflex is the mistake, not a moral failure, not ignorance, just a learned habit of avoiding stillness. You've been trained to keep going, to stay productive, to stay entertained, to stay busy inside your own head. So when a moment demands presence instead of movement, the instinct is to escape. You check your phone. You change rooms. You start thinking loudly again. Anything to break the silence that suddenly feels too full. But what's being avoided isn't fear, it's depth. That pause you ignored wasn't empty. It was charged with information, not verbal information, but directional information. It was pointing towards something inside you that had just been activated. When you dismiss the moment, you don't just miss a feeling, you miss a signal. Your system had briefly aligned. Your attention, body, and perception came into the same place at the same time. That alignment doesn't happen often because most of your life is fragmented. Part of you here, part of you elsewhere. So when alignment does happen, it matters. But the mind prefers familiarity over truth, and familiarity lives in distraction, so it explains the sensation away as imagination, or nerves, or coincidence. It does this quickly, almost automatically, because explanation restores control. Once you have a label, you can relax again. You don't have to change anything. And that's exactly what gets lost. These moments are thresholds, not dramatic ones, small, subtle thresholds where awareness could deepen if you let it. Ignoring them doesn't cause harm, but it keeps everything the same. Most people live years without realizing how often they step up to these edges and then turn back. Another part of the mistake is assuming the moment requires action. People feel the sensation and think something is expected of them immediately. That pressure creates anxiety, and anxiety pushes them to shut down the experience instead of staying with it. But nothing needed to be done. The value of the moment isn't in reacting, it's in noticing. Noticing what shifted right before it happened, noticing where your attention went, noticing how your body responded. Those details matter because they teach you how your awareness works. When you ignore the moment, you stay unconscious of your own patterns. You miss the chance to see what captures you, what opens you, what makes you present. There's also a subtle self-distrust involved. Many people have learned not to trust their internal signals unless they can be immediately justified. If there's no external proof, they assume it's meaningless. But your internal world is constantly guiding you, long before logic steps in. Sensations, hunches, shifts in attention, these are not enemies of reason. They're raw data. Ignoring them doesn't make you more rational. It makes you less informed. The moment you felt watched was your awareness knocking on the door of itself. You don't have to open it wide, you just have to not pretend it wasn't there. Another common mistake is trying to analyze the experience while it's happening. The mind jumps in with questions, explanations, theories. That analysis pulls you out of the experience and back into thought. It's like trying to describe a smell instead of smelling it. These moments aren't meant to be solved in real time, they're meant to be felt. Understood later, if at all. The information they carry is experiential, not conceptual. When you override the feeling with thinking, you collapse the very state that allowed it to appear. Awareness retreats, the body relaxes back into habit, and the opening closes. People often believe that if something important is happening, it will force itself, that it will be loud, obvious, undeniable. But the deeper things rarely behave that way. They whisper. They test your willingness to stay present without certainty. Ignoring the moment teaches your system that subtlety isn't welcome, that only loud signals get attention. Over time, your sensitivity dulls, not because you lost it, but because you stopped listening. And yet the moments keep coming. They arrive again and again, waiting to see if you'll respond differently. Not with fear, not with excitement, just with presence. If you did stay, even for a few seconds, you'd notice something else. The feeling doesn't escalate. It settles. It organizes. It becomes less strange and more clear. You realize you're not being invaded, you're being invited. Invited to remain aware without distraction. To observe without immediately reacting. To experience yourself as more than a stream of thoughts. And this is where the next realization begins to take shape. Because once you stop running from the moment, you start to sense that observation isn't a one-way process. You're not just noticing the world, you're participating in an exchange. Most people grow up believing observation moves in only one direction. You look at the world stays still, and nothing looks back. That belief feels safe. It keeps everything clean and controlled. But it isn't how perception actually works. The moment you truly observe something, you enter into a relationship with it. This doesn't mean the object itself has eyes or intention in the way the mind imagines. It means that attention creates contact. And contact always changes both sides, even if the change is subtle. Think about the difference between passing someone on the street and really noticing them. When you truly notice, something shifts. Your body adjusts. Your awareness expands. And often the other person feels it too, even if they can't explain why. They might glance up. They might slow down. Something registers. That's not fantasy. It's how attention operates in shared space. The same dynamic exists when you observe ideas, symbols, memories, or moments with depth. You don't just receive them, you engage them. And engagement leaves a trace. When your attention moves towards something with sincerity, it organizes your internal world around that point. Your thoughts quiet, your senses sharpen. You become coherent, and coherence is noticeable. This is where the feeling of being observed comes in. It's not that something suddenly appears to watch you. It's that the boundary between observer and observed becomes thinner. You're no longer isolated inside your thoughts. You're participating in a field of awareness that includes you. Your mind interprets this unfamiliar state as external attention because it feels exposed. You're used to watching without being seen, used to consuming without being touched by what you consume. But deep observation doesn't work that way. When you access something that matters, an image that resonates, an idea that unsettles you, a realization that stirs something old, you don't just take it in. You open yourself to it. And openness always carries the sensation of visibility. Not visibility to a person, but visibility to experience itself. This is why the feeling often comes with a sense of stillness. Movement drops away. Sound seems farther. Time feels slightly stretched. Those are signs that your attention has become unified instead of scattered. In that state, you're not hiding behind noise. You're present enough to feel presence. The mind resists this because it removes the illusion of distance. You're no longer separate from what you're engaging with. Hand separation is comfortable. It lets you analyze without being affected. It lets you observe without responsibility. But the moments we're talking about don't allow that comfort. They pull you into participation. There's an ancient idea found across many traditions that says knowledge changes the knower. Not metaphorically, literally. Once you truly see something, you cannot return to exactly who you were before. Even small realizations carry that effect. So when you observe something that reaches you deeply, your system reacts as if a door has opened, not because something is entering, but because you've stopped closing yourself off. That openness can feel like being seen because you are, in a sense, seen by your own awareness. You're witnessing yourself witnessing, and that reflection creates intensity. Most people rarely experience this because they skim through life. They look, but they don't see. They scroll, but they don't engage. They hear, but they don't listen. So when a moment breaks through and demands full attention, it feels overwhelming. But there's nothing hostile about it. It's simply unfamiliar. Another reason this sensation feels external is because attention has momentum. When you focus deeply, that focus doesn't instantly shut off, it lingers. It continues scanning. You become more alert to your surroundings, more sensitive to subtle cues. In that heightened state, you notice things you normally ignore. The quiet hum of a room, the space behind you, the texture of silence. Your mind tries to explain this increased sensitivity by projecting it outward. It says, something is there. What's actually there is awareness. This doesn't mean everything you observe observes you in the same way. It means that deep engagement changes the way you exist in the moment. You step out of passive consumption and into active presence. And presence feels mutual. The mistake is taking this mutuality literally instead of experientially. People imagine beings, entities, or forces watching them. That imagination distracts from what's actually happening, the collapse of distance between you and experience. When distance collapses, responsibility appears. You can't unknow what you've noticed. You can't go back to pretending you didn't feel the shift. Something has been accessed, and access goes both ways. This is where many people pull back again. They sense that staying present might require something of them. Not action, but honesty. Not belief, but attention. And attention is powerful, because once you realize observation is not neutral, another realization begins to surface. If observing opens a door, then what exactly is on the other side of that door becomes an important question. When that question forms, the mind usually rushes to extremes. It imagines something external, dramatic, almost cinematic. A presence with intent, a watcher hidden somewhere. That image is understandable, but it's also misleading. It pulls attention away from what's actually happening. What is observing you is not something separate that suddenly arrived. It's something that was already there, long before the moment felt strange. Start with something simple. You are not a single point of awareness. You are layers of awareness operating at the same time. There's the part of you that thinks, the part that reacts, the part that feels, and the part that notices all of that happening. Most of the time, that last part stays quiet, overshadowed by noise and habit. In moments of deep attention, that quieter layer steps forward. When you observe something that truly affects you, the usual hierarchy inside you shifts. Thought slows down, reaction pauses, and the observing layer becomes more active. You're no longer just experiencing. You're aware that you're experiencing. That shift alone can feel like being watched, because for the first time in a while, you are visible to yourself. This isn't abstract philosophy. You felt it before in different forms. That moment when you suddenly realize you're alive right now, or when you catch yourself repeating a pattern and see it clearly instead of being inside it. There's a slight jolt, almost like stepping back from yourself. That jolt is awareness turning inward. Your mind isn't used to being observed. It's used to running the show, so when awareness looks at the mind instead of through it, the mind reacts. It tries to externalize the sensation. It says, something is looking at me, because it doesn't recognize its own reflection. But what's actually happening is simpler and more unsettling at the same time. You're encountering a wider version of yourself, not a higher self in a mystical sense, but a broader field of awareness that includes your thoughts instead of being trapped inside them. This field is quieter, more neutral, less reactive, and because it doesn't speak in words, it feels unfamiliar. Familiar things feel safe. Unfamiliar things feel intense. That's why the sensation carries weight, not because something unknown entered your space, but because something known was revealed that you don't often acknowledge. There's also another layer that makes the experience feel external. Awareness doesn't stop at the boundary of your skin. You're constantly reading your environment, adjusting to it, synchronizing with it. When your internal awareness becomes clearer, your sensitivity to the environment increases as well. You begin to notice the space you're in, not just the objects inside it, the silence between sounds, the distance behind you, the feeling of being located somewhere rather than just thinking somewhere. That expanded sensing can feel like a tension coming from outside, when in reality it's a tension extending outward. This is why the experience often feels neutral, not threatening. There's no emotion attached at first, just intensity, just presence. Fear only appears when the mind adds a story, and stories rush in quickly if you let them. Cultural imagery fills the gap. Spiritual language fills the gap. Personal beliefs fill the gap, but none of those are required to understand what's happening. They're interpretations layered on top of a raw perceptual shift. At its core, the observer you feel is awareness without a mask. Most of your life, awareness wears the mask of thought, or emotion, or identity. In these moments, the mask slips slightly, and when something that fundamental reveals itself, the system reacts. It's like hearing your own voice played back for the first time. You know it's yours, but it doesn't feel like it. There's a disconnect, a brief sense of, that can't be me. The same thing happens here. You're meeting the part of you that watches without commentary, without judgment, without urgency. That part doesn't feel personal, even though it's the most intimate thing you have, because it doesn't need you to believe in it. It's there whether you notice it or not. And when that awareness becomes active, it changes the way you exist in the moment. You're less reactive, more still, more receptive. That change has consequences. You begin to sense that you're not alone inside your own experience, not because something else joined you, but because you're no longer collapsed into one narrow point of view. This realization can be unsettling because it quietly dismantles the idea that you are only your thoughts, or only your reactions, or only your personality. And once that door opens, even slightly, the experience tends to leave traces. The world doesn't look quite the same. Moments feel more charged, silence feels heavier, and you start noticing physical signals that accompany these shifts, signals that your body has always produced, but that you rarely paid attention to. That's when another question naturally emerges, not in words but in sensation. If this wasn't just imagination, how can you tell when it's real? When something is just in your head, it usually stays there. It doesn't touch the body. It doesn't alter the room. It doesn't leave traces once your thoughts move on. Imagination tends to be light, fleeting, easy to replace with another thought. What you experienced was different, and your body knows that before your mind does. The first clue is how physical it feels. Your skin reacts. A chill runs across your arms or neck without any change in temperature. Your chest tightens slightly, or your stomach drops for no clear reason. These reactions don't wait for permission from thought. They happen fast, automatically, because the body responds to changes in awareness the same way it responds to changes in environment. You didn't decide to feel it. It arrived. Another sign is silence. Not the absence of sound, but a change in how sound is perceived. The room feels quieter, even if nothing actually stopped making noise. Background sounds seem farther away. The space around you feels thicker, almost like it gained weight. That kind of silence isn't created by imagination. It happens when attention becomes unified and sensory input is processed differently. Time often shifts too. A few seconds feel longer than they should. You might not notice this consciously until afterward, but during the moment there's a sense of suspension, as if the usual flow of time paused to make room for something else. Imagination tends to speed time up, not slow it down. Then there's the feeling of location. You suddenly become aware of where you are, not conceptually but physically. The floor under your feet, the space behind your back, the distance between you and the walls. It's as if your awareness steps out of your head and occupies your body fully. That kind of grounding doesn't come from fantasy. Fantasy pulls you away from the body. This experience pulls you into it. Your breathing is another signal. It may become shallow for a moment or slow down without effort. Sometimes it even pauses briefly. Breath responds directly to nervous system shifts, not to abstract thoughts. When breathing changes on its own, something deeper is happening. There's also a distinct emotional neutrality to the moment. It's intense, but not emotional in the usual sense. Not happiness, not sadness, not fear at first, just presence. Raw, unfiltered awareness. Imagination almost always carries a tone, a mood, a storyline. This doesn't. The body doesn't know how to categorize it, so it stays alert. You might also notice tingling in your hands, your scalp, your spine, a subtle buzzing or warmth. These sensations often appear when attention becomes concentrated and internal signals amplify. They're common in moments of deep focus, meditation, or sudden insight, even in people who don't consider themselves spiritual. And then there's the after effect. If it were just in your head, it would vanish cleanly once you moved on. But this kind of moment lingers, not dramatically, but quietly. You feel slightly different afterward, more alert, more reflective, sometimes even more sensitive for a while. The world feels sharper or more vivid or strangely calm. You may find yourself replaying the moment later, not because it scared you, but because it felt unfinished, like something opened but didn't fully explain itself. Another important sign is consistency. When you look back, you realize these moments tend to appear under similar conditions. When you're alone, when you're quiet, when something meaningful has just caught your attention. Random imagination doesn't follow patterns. Perceptual shifts do. There's also the fact that the body reacts before the story forms. Fear, if it comes at all, usually comes later, after the mind steps in and starts interpreting. During the moment itself, the sensation is often clean and direct. That sequence matters. If it were anxiety or fantasy, the story would come first and the body would follow. Here the body leads and the story tries to catch up. You might also notice that the feeling resists being forced. You can't recreate it on command. You can't think your way back into it. It comes when attention aligns naturally, and it leaves when that alignment dissolves. Imagination is easy to repeat. This isn't. And perhaps the most telling sign is how hard it is to explain. Not because it's confusing, but because words feel inadequate. You know what happened, but language flattens it. That's a sign you're dealing with direct experience rather than mental construction. Your system is responding to something real, a shift in awareness, a change in how perception organizes itself. None of this means something supernatural occurred. It means something fundamental did. You stepped out of habitual perception and into direct presence. And presence has a physical signature. The body always knows when you're fully here. Once you recognize these signs, it becomes harder to dismiss the experience as nothing. Not because you need to believe anything new, but because your own sensations told a consistent story. And when that realization settles in, another question begins to surface quietly. If this perception is real and some people feel it more than others, what makes that difference? It's easy to assume that people who notice these moments are somehow different from everyone else. More gifted, more intuitive, more open. But that assumption creates distance where none is needed. The difference isn't who you are, it's how often you're present. Sensitive perception isn't a trait you're born with or without. It's a capacity that develops based on how you use your attention over time. Some people live almost entirely inside their thoughts. Their attention rarely rests in the body or the present moment. When something subtle happens, it gets drowned out by mental noise. Not because the signal isn't there, but because the receiver is overloaded. Others, often without realizing it, spend more time connected to what they're actually experiencing. They notice shifts in mood, changes in energy, small bodily sensations. They don't rush past them. That habit alone makes perception sharper. Think of it like hearing. If you're always surrounded by loud noise, you lose sensitivity to quiet sounds. But if you spend time in silence, you start hearing things you never noticed before. Nothing new appeared. Your sensitivity changed. The same principle applies here. People who seem more perceptive are often people who have gone through periods of introspection, loss, uncertainty, or deep questioning. Life slowed them down at some point. It forced them inward. And in that slowing down, attention became refined. This isn't about suffering being required. It's about interruption. When your usual routines break, your awareness wakes up. You start noticing what you used to ignore. Over time, that noticing becomes familiar instead of strange. The body learns that subtle signals are worth paying attention to. Another factor is tolerance for ambiguity. Many people need immediate clarity. They want to know exactly what something means right away. If they can't explain it, they dismiss it. That reflex shuts down perception quickly. People with more sensitive perception are often more comfortable not knowing immediately. They can sit with a feeling without labeling it. They allow experience to unfold before interpreting it. That patience creates space for subtle awareness to register. There's also the role of attention training, even informal training. People who spend time reading deeply, reflecting, creating, walking without distractions, or simply sitting with their thoughts develop a different relationship with their inner world. They notice when something shifts because they know what normal feels like. Most people don't. They move from one stimulus to another without ever settling. So when awareness sharpens, it feels overwhelming instead of natural. The system isn't used to clarity. This sensitivity is often mistaken for fragility. But it's not weakness. It's responsiveness. The ability to register small changes without being thrown off by them. Interestingly, children have this naturally. They notice atmosphere. They sense tension. They feel when something is off without needing explanations. Over time, most of them are taught to ignore that sensitivity in favor of efficiency and certainty. Some people never fully lose it. Others rediscover it later in life. What looks like spiritual awakening is often just a return to noticing. There's also a physiological aspect. Nervous systems vary. Some are more reactive, others more regulated. But reactivity isn't the same as sensitivity. A reactive system responds loudly. A sensitive system responds clearly. Clarity comes from regulation, not intensity. People who learn to calm their nervous system, whether intentionally or through life experience, gain access to finer perception. When the system isn't constantly on edge, it can detect quieter signals. That's why these moments often happen when you're calm, alone, or reflective, not when you're rushing or overstimulated. Another misunderstood point is that sensitivity doesn't mean constant experiences. It means awareness when something meaningful happens. People who notice these moments aren't overwhelmed by them daily. They simply don't miss them when they appear. And when they appear, they're recognized instead of overridden. There's no hierarchy here, no better or worse, just different relationships with attention. The reason this matters is because sensitive perception isn't an end state. It's a doorway. It reveals how much of your life happens beneath conscious thought. How often your body knows before your mind does. How presence changes experience. Once you see that, you also begin to see something else. Sensitivity doesn't make you weaker or more exposed. In fact, it points to something most people overlook. The same awareness that allows you to feel these moments also gives you more choice in how you respond to them. And that realization leads naturally into a deeper truth. You may feel more exposed than you thought, but exposure is only one side of the equation. When awareness sharpens, The first thing you usually notice is exposure. It feels like your usual protective layers have thinned. Distraction drops away. Mental noise quiets. And without those buffers, everything feels closer, more immediate, more intense. That's why many people instinctively pull back. They mistake exposure for vulnerability and vulnerability for danger. But those aren't the same thing. Exposure simply means you're no longer hiding from experience. You're meeting it directly. Most of your life, you're shielded by habits, thinking about the next thing, replaying the past, filling silence. Those habits keep you safe, but they also keep you numb. When they fall away, even briefly, the world feels sharper. That sharpness can feel like weakness at first. You feel the room more, you feel your body more, you feel yourself thinking and reacting in real time. There's nowhere to disappear into, and the mind says this is too much. But what's actually happening is the opposite of fragility. You're seeing clearly. Exposure isn't something new that happened to you. It's something old that stopped being avoided. You were always this open. You just didn't notice because your attention was elsewhere. And here's the part that often gets missed. The same clarity that makes you feel exposed also gives you influence. Not influence over other people, influence over your own state. When you're present, you're not being dragged around by unconscious reactions. You feel impulses arise instead of becoming them. You notice fear before it turns into panic. You notice tension before it becomes action. That gap is power, quiet power. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. But it's the difference between being pushed by experience and responding to it. Most people never feel this because they live inside reaction. They think that's strength, endurance, toughness. But reaction is automatic. It doesn't require awareness. It just happens. Presence does require awareness, and awareness gives you choice. When you feel that someone is watching sensation, part of what you're sensing is this exposure. You're no longer hidden from yourself. Your inner movements are visible, and visibility feels risky when you're not used to it. But nothing is attacking you. What's actually available in that moment is alignment. Your body, attention, and perception are in the same place. That alignment makes your experience more intense but also more stable. Think about standing firmly versus constantly shifting your weight. The firm stance feels more exposed at first because you're fully there. But it's also more grounded. Power works the same way. When you're present, your nervous system organizes. Your breathing steadies, your posture changes, you occupy your space differently. People feel this even if they don't know why. Situations respond differently because you're not fragmented. That's not mystical, it's practical. Exposure without awareness feels overwhelming. Exposure with awareness feels clear. The reason many people never discover this is because they retreat too quickly. The moment presence sharpens, they distract themselves. They mistake discomfort for a warning instead of an adjustment. But if you stay just a little longer, something shifts. The intensity doesn't keep rising. It levels out. You realize you're not losing control, you're gaining contact. The sensation of being watched softens into a sense of being here, fully. And from that place, you're not at the mercy of every thought or sensation. You're aware of them as they arise. That awareness doesn't suppress anything. It doesn't force calm. It simply holds experience without being swallowed by it. That's the kind of power most people never learn about, because it doesn't look like power. It doesn't dominate, it doesn't push, it doesn't protect by hardening, it protects by clarity. When you're clear, you see what's actually happening instead of what fear imagines. You respond instead of react. You notice when a moment asks for attention and when it doesn't. That clarity also changes how you relate to the feeling of being observed. You stop interpreting it as threat. You recognize it as heightened presence, a signal that awareness has come online. And once you recognize that, something else begins to emerge. You start to sense that these moments aren't random tests of your nerves. They're invitations to stand in awareness instead of retreating into habit, to remain aligned even when intensity appears, which leads to a deeper shift in perspective. What if the moments you think you stumbled into weren't accidents at all? What if some of the things that catch your attention do so because they're meant to meet you at the level you're now able to perceive? You probably tell yourself you chose what you saw. You clicked it, you noticed it, you stopped scrolling. From the surface, that feels true. But when you look closer, something doesn't quite add up. You passed by thousands of images, words, faces, moments that day. Why did that one stop you? Attention doesn't land randomly, it's pulled. Long before your conscious mind makes a decision, something inside you is already oriented. Your history, your unanswered questions, your quiet tensions, your readiness for change, all of that shapes what stands out to you. You don't scan reality evenly. You resonate with certain things and pass by others without a trace. So when something reaches you deeply, it's not just because you looked at it. It's because you were available to it. Think about how memories work. You can walk past the same street for years and feel nothing. Then one day, in a different internal state, the same street hits you with emotion. The street didn't change, you did, and suddenly contact happened. The same principle applies here. What you saw met you at the exact frequency you were carrying in that moment. Not in a mystical sense, but in a psychological and perceptual one. Your attention was tuned in a certain way, and that tuning allowed this particular thing to break through the noise. In that sense, it didn't just appear to you, it found you receptive. This idea can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the belief that you're always in control of what matters to you. But control isn't how awareness works. Awareness responds. It's drawn. It opens when something matches an internal readiness. That's why timing matters so much. You may have encountered the same idea before and felt nothing. The same symbol, the same phrase, the same type of image. But this time it landed. This time it stirred something. That doesn't happen by chance. It happens when the internal conditions are right. This doesn't mean destiny chose you in a dramatic sense. It means your attention aligned with something meaningful at that moment in your life. And alignment is active. When alignment happens, your system wakes up. You feel more present, more exposed, more aware. That's why the sensation followed. Not because the thing itself carried power, but because the meeting did. Two things came into contact: what you were ready to see and what was able to be seen. The reason this feels unsettling is because it reverses the usual direction of agency. Instead of, "I am the one looking," it becomes, "something met me." That can feel like losing control if you're used to being the driver of your experience. But it's actually how learning, growth, and insight have always worked. You didn't choose the moments that shaped you most. They chose you when you were open enough to receive them. A conversation, a loss, a realization, a sudden understanding. Looking back, those moments often feel inevitable, even if they didn't feel planned. This is no different, just quieter. When something chooses you in this way, it doesn't demand belief. It doesn't ask for action. It simply asks to be acknowledged, to be noticed without being dismissed or dramatized. That's where many people go wrong. They either inflate the moment into something extraordinary or crush it into nothing. Both reactions miss the point. The point is contact. Contact between awareness and meaning. When that contact happens, your perception shifts because your internal map is updating. Something new has entered your field of relevance, and relevance reorganizes attention automatically. That reorganization is what you felt. The sensation of being watched wasn't about an external chooser standing behind the moment. It was about the moment standing in front of you, fully present, asking you to meet it without distraction. Most people don't realize how selective reality already is. You live inside a narrow slice of what's possible, filtered by habit and expectation. When something breaks that filter, even slightly, it feels charged. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's different. And difference wakes you up. If you slow down and look honestly, you'll notice that these moments tend to cluster around periods of change. Times when old explanations no longer work. When questions are forming, but answers haven't arrived yet. When certainty loosens. That's when you're most available. Availability is not weakness, it's readiness. When you're ready, you don't have to search for meaning aggressively. Meaning comes to you through ordinary things that suddenly aren't ordinary anymore. That doesn't mean everything you notice is significant, but some things are, and you can feel the difference immediately. Your body reacts, your attention locks in, your inner noise drops. That's the signature of contact. The mistake is thinking that because the moment didn't explain itself, it meant nothing. Some experiences aren't meant to be understood right away. They're meant to shift your orientation, not deliver conclusions. What you saw didn't give you answers. It changed the quality of your attention, and that change is the real message. Once that happens, you're no longer exactly where you were before. Something has moved, something has opened, and the next time the sensation appears, it won't be quite as foreign. Because a part of you will recognize it. Not as something watching you from the outside, but as a moment asking you to stay present long enough to listen. Now you know this feeling isn't random, and it isn't something to fear. The next time it happens, nothing dramatic is required. Don't run from it, don't label it, just pause. Let your breathing settle. Let your attention stay where it is for a few seconds longer than usual. Notice what changed right before the sensation appeared. Notice what feels different in your body, in the room, in your mind. That moment of quiet observation is where clarity begins. You don't need to chase the experience or wait for it to return. When it comes, meet it calmly. Presence is enough. Over time, these moments stop feeling strange and start feeling familiar, like reminders that you're more awake than you thought. If you stayed with me until the end, write this sentence in the comments: I stayed present. And if this spoke to you and you want more content like this, choose one of the videos on the screen now and keep exploring.